Let's learn how to do a one-row buttonhole. These are worked during one row of the fabric. So as you're knitting your ribbing to cardigans, like the Garter Marler cardigan, you can watch this one-row buttonhole tutorial and learn how to make beautiful buttons on your sweaters. This is what the buttonhole looks like. I'm going to show you a buttonhole with 3 stitches in DK weight yarn, and it looks about that big. And you can work this buttonhole in one row. So when I work this on my cardigans, I usually work half of my ribbing, and when I'm halfway through with my ribbing, I do a buttonhole on the next right side row, and then I have the other half of my ribbing to knit. So I put that buttonhole in the middle of my ribbed button band. So here's how to do it. You're going to work in 2x2 ribbing until you reach a spot in your knitting where you want to put that buttonhole. So I'm going to do the buttonhole on these 3 stitches right there. So the first thing you need to do is slip one with yarn in front. So bring the yarn forward, slip one with yarn in front, and place that yarn towards the back. Slip one purlwise, and then pass the first slip stitch over. We're going to do that 3 times for a 3-stitch buttonhole. So that was 1, slip the next stitch, pass it over. That's 2, slip the next stitch, pass it over, that's 3, and look, there's our nice gap for the buttonhole. After you do that 3 times for a 3-stitch buttonhole, place that last stitch onto the left needle, turn to work the wrong side. So this is the wrong side. I'm going to cast on 4 stitches. You need to cast on 1 more stitch than the number of stitches you bound off. So I bound off 3 stitches, so I need to cast on 4. I'm going to use the cable cast on method, going in between those stitches on the left needle, placing it on the needle 4 times. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. Turn to work the right side. Slip the first stitch with yarn in back onto the right needle, right there. After you do that, pass the last cast on stitch over this stitch. So I'm going to take that last cast on stitch and pass it over the stitch I just slipped and give it a nice little pull. And look at that, we have our nice buttonhole, nice and tidy. So you're going to do that all the way until you reach the end of your row, and you can place those holes wherever you want. I usually place them evenly throughout my button band, so maybe every 12 or every 14 stitches or so you can do a buttonhole. But after you've passed that stitch over, you should be good to go. You're going to repeat all those instructions until you have the number of buttonholes you want. So just work in your ribbing until you reach another buttonhole location, but all of that slips, all those slips I just did, makes it quite tight and tidy, but you cast off and cast on right away. So a one-row buttonhole, you get that nice buttonhole as you're working across the right side of your fabric. Now that you know how to do buttonholes, you can try that on the Garter Marler cardigan. I'll link to this pattern in the description box down below, but you should try it on some of your own design ideas too. It's really quick, really easy, and I love that you can just do it all in one row. You make the buttonhole, you close it, and try and see which size works best for you. That 3-row buttonhole I showed in DK weight yarn works really good for 1 inch, 2.5 centimeter buttons. But if it feels a little too big or a little too small, use this same technique for 2-stitch buttonholes or 4 or 5-stitch buttonholes. So play around with it, and I think it's going to unlock some really cool ideas in your knitting.